Hi, I'm Nick Lalonde, your host of What's Next, making your third act your best act. Today you're going to hear from accomplished executive Christine Washburn. She works in the robotics space as a chief marketing officer specializing in marketing strategy and customer acquisition. She's worked everywhere from startups to large companies. What stuck out to me in my conversation with Christine is when I asked her about her retirement journey, she asked me, what is retirement? At 60 years old, Christine still felt like she had a lot left in her tank. And when we talked through traditional retirement, she said she couldn't see a world where she wasn't working or volunteering in some capacity. Be sure to listen in as to what work provides Christine. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Christine as much as I did. So what do you feel like gives you purpose today, and how might that change when you do transition maybe away from the high-tech job you're in today?
Yep. So that's a good question, because it's funny, my daughter's 25 and we're very similar in this. So I love to feel like I got something done, and I love to be able to measure something. So I love knowing this project got moved along, or we acquired a new customer, or this particular program I can see is profitable or doing well. So I'm very metrics driven. And I think even, when I've been in between jobs and doing things, I'm still sort of mentally measuring, like, what did I do during the day? So that's a big turn on for me, is just what am I able to accomplish today, even if it's small things. So that's important. And again, like, even sometimes when as I mentioned, I've been in between jobs, how many books did I read? Did I finally tackle this project that's been bothering me, or did I take a webinar and learn a new skill? So that actually gets me excited.
And when you think about retirement, is there anything that excites you?
Well, I think I mentioned this already, but the ability to travel, spend more time with family. I mean, with COVID, actually, that made, in some ways, that made things easier, because, again, commutes kind of went away, or at least formal commutes every single day. And so it's made it easier to stay committed. My daughter's in New York, but she's pretty flexible, so she can come to Boston really easily, and she does. Whereas I think when I was just starting out at her age, there were never options like that. So traveling, more time with family, as I mentioned before, getting more deeply involved with a couple of philanthropic perspectives. As I said, the coaching. One thing that I do in the summer, we're on Cape Cod a lot. There's a women's organization. It's called We Can, like WE and then Can, and it's very similar to kind of the coaching that I'm doing. And I just do like one day a month, but in a lot of cases, it's women who are either starting their own business, or it's only women, which I think they should extend it, or it's women who have, and it's a lot of this, women who have been in abusive situations or divorce, and lots of times have no money, no skills, and they have to get a job. And they don't know how to do a LinkedIn profile. They don't know how to do a resume. They don't. Some have actually been recent immigrants, and so they don't really know how to interview or even go about that. So one day a month, I'll meet with 2 or 3 people, and I think that's a really interesting organization. And I have 2 people that have done really well, but I'm really excited for. One's an entrepreneur, and she started, it's been like 9 months, and her business is actually doing really well. And then one woman just got a job, which was very exciting because she didn't think that she could. So I getting more involved in something like that, where I can sort of stay in touch and see how these people are doing, would also be really interesting. And I could spend more time probably than one day a month.
Is there anything that scares you about retirement?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Being useless. My job has been a big part of what I am. I've identified myself with my job for years and years and years, and being high achieving and figuring stuff out. Like, I like to solve problems, and not having that opportunity, or worse, having people think, well, she doesn't know how to do that anymore, which, I do think is coming, frightens me a lot. I'm not that frightened about having spare time, because I can figure out ways to fill it, but not being useful is definitely a fear.
Yeah, no, that's a big thing I hear a lot.
So let me ask you this. What do you feel like work provides you outside of money and financial security? So I've heard, feeling useful, high achievement, so
Mhm,
accomplishing tasks.
mhm.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, again, I don't know if I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but I like to figure things out.
Yeah.
And lots of times, especially at newer companies, there's no history, there's no set of data to look at, which, again, can also be really helpful too, just doing a better job of analyzing the data or being more proactive or more prescriptive. But I like to figure things out. So there's nothing that excites me more than figuring out, the right messaging to attract this customer. Or, gee, the product was going down this path. Actually, that's not really what the customers care about. It's this, and sort of having that light bulb moment. And that's not always a huge payoff, but knowing that I was able to improve the product or do a better job of selling it, or even help the customer get more out of the product. Lots of times they're only using 20% of it, and 80% would really make their lives and their own customers' lives better. That again is exciting to me.
When did you and your husband find out that you guys were financially independent? It sounds like you've flipped a couple companies and been through an IPO, right? And so there's been some liquidity events. But what age were you financially independent where you said, "Hey, I'm really just working because I want to"?
Um, it's hard to say because we've both been really fortunate. So we're at the age where we were in the 90s in Boston in high tech, and you could write stuff on a napkin and it would go public. So it's like we were really fortunate to kind of be in the right place at the right time. So we had those opportunities, and there's just not a lot of IPOs or that sort of easy money that's happening now. So, I mean, we were fortunate. That's how we bought our first house. That's how we paid for our daughter's college. That's how we kind of paid for this. So, I mean, I still do, even though I would say we're pretty well off, I still get concerned about, if we're in our 90s, are we still going to be able to live the same quality of life? So that is actually a little issue as well. So it's more quality of life. And I think too with we both have aging parents, and more the costs to keep them in their home and to keep them living a quality of life are incredibly expensive. And so, I can see whatever we've saved going toward that, and I don't, hopefully my daughter won't need an inheritance. She's making her own way. And none of us were brought up that way, but like, I just want to make sure that we're not old and poor.
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely.
that is kind of a concern. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. We've probably been somewhat financially independent since probably our early 40s, but
Right.
um again, I think both of us are somewhat cautious, and we wanted to pay cash for houses and college and things like that, so we've been sort of careful about that.
Absolutely. So when you guys look at the budget, if you were going to retire in the next few years, step away from what you're doing, are there any areas that you'd have to cut back today?
Well, day to day, we spend a fair amount of money and we eat out a lot. So, I mean, I would say we like things like cars and boats. So we probably wouldn't be able to do that. I can't imagine wanting to cut back on like lavish trips. I think, or I should say lavish, but just going somewhere really interesting, and doing interesting things and getting a local guide, and I think paying maybe extra for that is worth it. Um,
Hmm.
so and I mean, again, I hate to sound elitist. I mean, I feel like we're really lucky that
Hmm.
we have some of these choices to make, and that like cutting back is just not spending as much versus having to cut way back onto you know it's not like we have to cut fuel or sell something, or I mean, again, it's I feel like we're fortunate.
Let me ask you this. Sometimes when I talk to high achievers, right, they're both used to being in the workplace. So you and your husband are both working maybe 40, 50, 60 hours a
Oh,
week.
easily, yeah.
So if you guys were both home all the time, what kind of conversation do you feel like you and your husband would need to have? Would there be any conversation over space or boundaries, now that you guys are both retired and at home full time?
Yeah, so it's funny you said that. So when COVID happened, we were both home because up until COVID, I was pretty much commuting. I had some flexibility, but for the most part, I was in an office, and he actually worked from home. And then our daughter was home because school let out. So there were three of us banging away on the internet. And we sort of had to make our own spaces. He had an office. I actually did have an office in the house, and then she ended up in her bedroom, and we would sort of see each other in the kitchen or at mealtime. I would say that I find my husband's very entrepreneurial. I should say probably, he is a better business person than I am, and he's much more numeric than I am. So I like to pick his brain a lot on things like that because he's just really strong there. So we do have a lot of work related questions. I would say I'm a liberal arts major, even though I'm in high tech. So I'm probably a better writer than he is. So if he needs grammar questions or how to say something without offending someone, or, I can help him there. So we try to help each other. Definitely when I was home more, it made him more crazy because he was just like, I'm not used to your being here. And I was like, this is great. I can do laundry. Like I can get all this stuff done at home. Although I would say that, as I'm sure you saw and many people saw with COVID, like we were just working all the time. Like we were working more because we could always just write, or even, I didn't even have to walk into my office. I could just take my laptop and still be doing something, while I was, doing dinner or something like that. So there were a few questions about space, but I would say at this point, we're pretty much used to having each other around. Sometimes he'll say, you're really loud, which is why I'm out here. He'll say, I can hear you, or you're really loud, or, and I think sometimes during team meetings, we get excited and that I sometimes, I guess, talk loud because I'm being enthusiastic. So there's conversations like that. I would say both of us hate the fact that we eat a ton more now that we're, home too. Like that was another thing. Like I wouldn't snack as much when I was in an office. And it's like now I'll be like, if I'm up really early and have breakfast and then work for 3 hours, then it's like 9:00. I'm ready for my second breakfast, which is bad. So both of us have said like, we got to stop, snacking so much. But
so walk me through like a typical day in retirement. And let's say you guys are both retired in this scenario. In your typical day, I mean, are you guys doing everything together? Are you going your separate ways? I mean,
No.
what does that look like?
No, I would say we're going our separate ways. So I mean, like I'm just trying to think. He would love to go fishing, or we do both like to work out. He tends to like to spin or bike. I'm more of a runner, so I wouldn't say that we work out together, but we might do a workout in the morning. Neither of us are golfers. He would probably want to go on a boat. That would be his idea. I might want to go see some friends or go to a museum or hang out somewhere. We both like to eat and try good food. So I'd say we would be together at lunch, or we would be together at dinner, or we would travel together. Like if we planned a trip together that wasn't a daily event, we would definitely do that together. But no, we're not the type, we don't go to the grocery store together, and we don't do everything together. In fact, half the time when we're watching like television to unwind, we both like sports, but he's watching one thing on Netflix, I'm watching something else. We don't really even do that together.
So do you know anyone else who's retired?
Yes, I do.
And how are they handling retirement? Is it good for them? Is it bad for them? What do they think of it?
I would say they would say it's great.
Okay.
So they're close. So I would say there's like a new group of retirees. So there's people who are probably in their early 60s, and there's people who are like 70s, 80s, where I think the people who are in their 70s and 80s, and again, those are, I know some people who are in that space. I would say the women have a hard time if they didn't work, because it's like all of a sudden the husband's always around and the husband's having a really hard time. That's most of the people that are our age are probably not in that category. I would say we seem to more do our own thing. A lot of my women friends worked early on, but they didn't work as long as I did, or they were already coming back and doing consulting, or they had a lot more kids, so they couldn't, and then they got back into the workforce later. So they think it's great. But again, it's a slightly different situation.
Why are the men having such a hard time when they're retiring? You mentioned that the women might be at home, the men are coming into maybe their space and
Yeah. Well, again, and I would say these are just some people that I know that are still probably 10 years older than us. I would say the men had very high performing, high stress jobs. And in some ways it's good for them because that stress is hopefully gone. And that was one thing too that was interesting. Before COVID, a lot of us who were commuting and traveling a lot, we all had some sort of pain, like chronic pain. Like I had neck issues. They had back issues. And we figured out it was from traveling, being hunched over a laptop. I used to carry a huge briefcase, and it was just funny. A lot, we all had these, and some of it was just stress in the nervous system. It got better after COVID because we didn't all have to go in anymore. So some of that went away. So that was kind of interesting too. So that was a positive thing, I guess, with the younger group. With the older group, again, I think the women, for the most part, weren't working when the husband retired. They had been sort of on their own for a while, or they were doing consulting or volunteer. They weren't doing a full-time job like the husband. And the women were like, all of a sudden, he's around. Like, I have my routine and he's there. And I don't, and I don't want to hang out with them. I want to go do my things. That's what they would say. So it was just interesting. and I think some of the husbands are golfers and have been happy to golf. But some who were just like workaholics, I think, are struggling to find, like, what are they going to do? And so they were like, hey, I'll go grocery shopping with you, to the wife. And she's like, no, I don't want you to. Like, I can do it my own. It's much faster without you. Or they were, I don't know, one husband I know was all of a sudden starting to do all these woodworking projects, and he would start them and he wouldn't finish them. And so the wife was going nuts because she's like, there's all these unfinished projects like around the house, and I can't pick them up because he's in the middle of them. But I don't want to tell him not to do it because he like starts 5 and then he's goes on to something else. So, sort of things like that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so I'm curious, if you could continue doing what you're doing in the same role for another 10 years, and they said, we can't get rid of you, you're too valuable, would you stay in that role?
So, one thing about being a CMO, there's a lot of stress quarter to quarter, even if you're not public, and there's a lot of stress on making the numbers. So I think I would like to help consult. I would like to be less accountable. So not have to be the one that's, I would like to analyze something and then walk away. Provide input and then walk away, not have to physically execute on it. That's I think the part that I would like to leave behind at this point. And that's the part that's probably the most stressful.
And how many hours a week are you working today?
At least 60-ish. I mean, I got into this habit too when I had my daughter. She was in a lot of sports. And so I would work a certain amount. And again, my company was pretty flexible. And then I would go to her games or do other things. And then and especially even when she was younger, I wanted to give her a bath and be around. And then I would go back online like after 8 o'clock and work another 2 or 3 hours. And then I would try to catch up on weekends. So I still sort of do a lot of that. Like sometimes I feel like on the weekends, I can be a little bit more strategic because during the week, there's a lot of meetings and touch bases. And even if they're not scheduled meetings, people are slacking you. And it's just hard to kind of step back. So I probably still do some of that more strategic thinking or when I'm writing on the weekend. So it ends up being, like when you look at it, it's at least 60 probably.
Has there been any moment recently where you said, you know what, maybe my time is more valuable than money now that I have enough to live off of if anything were to happen, right? I'm financially independent. Has there been any moments where you've thought that?
Sure, all the time. When it's a particularly stressful moment, I'm like, what? I don't have to do this. Why am I doing this? What would it be like if I just said, hey, I'm gonna, I'll stick around for another quarter and then I'm gonna go do something else, or I'll help advise you, but you need to bring in someone full time to do what I was doing. So yeah, I think about that a lot.
What's preventing you today from maybe migrating to a role like you talked about previously, where maybe you're more consultative, you're not actually having to execute, but maybe you're working 20, 30, even 40 hours would probably seem like a vacation to you after working
Yeah.
60 hours a week consistently.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when we were both doing like 80 and we liked it, but that's in the past. That was before kids. I think there's the adrenaline. I mentioned this before, but there's the adrenaline rush of figuring things out, which I still really like. And just, hey, I nailed it, or I just gave this presentation and the board liked it, like that. I probably wouldn't have some of those opportunities as a more consultative person in the background. So I still enjoy that part of it.
And so you like being able to figure things out, feeling really useful is one of the things that you said before.
Yep.
Do you feel like what you do today and working 60 hours a week is the only way you could feel those things?
Probably not. I mean, I could probably be useful in more specific ways on some of the different areas that I talked about if I just doubled down on those. But I haven't done it yet. So, I'm sort of defaulting to what I'm used to, which is being useful or being high performing in a job, a day-to-day job.
Do you think there's a world where you said, Nick, maybe I age out of this, but do you think there's a world where maybe you look up and say, man, I'm burnt out from working 60 hours a week?
Well, that's how, I mean, so I sold a company at the end of, or I helped sell a company at the end of 2018, and I was so burnt out at the end of that. I mean, it was, we were PE firm owned and we sold to another PE firm, and it was just endless. And in fact, I remember from October to like the end of December, all we did was do market sizing and presentations and answer questions. And I mean, it was worth it. It worked out really well, but I just felt like I don't even remember anything of those months. And in fact, during that time, my daughter came home twice and she and my husband went off. They ended up going on trips, and I kept saying, I'm going to come for the weekend. I have to come for the weekend. It just never happened. So yeah, like at the end of that, and then when we sold it, I had the opportunity to continue, and I'm like, no, I'm done. So I was definitely ready. And I mean, I was so glad, because like even Christmas Eve, they were like, can you come in for a couple hours? And I had said I would. And so I was like, okay, thinking it would be a couple hours. It was just like, it's 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve and we're still going through the numbers. Yeah. So again, as of January 3rd or 4th, because I still had one last thing I had to do, I was like, I'm so glad not to have, and I was like, I want to reconnect with people, and I want to watch. I remember I was like, I want to watch The Wired. I've never watched that all the way through. I was like, I really want to catch up and watch Game of Thrones. So I did a lot of that stuff. So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely. And then I would say by April, I was like, okay, I'm ready to do something different now.
I can tell you just have such a fantastic work ethic. So, whatever company you're working with today is incredibly lucky to have you. But I am curious though, when do you feel like enough is enough? When would you look up and say, hey, I maybe have enough money to feel like I can step away, or maybe I have the sense of feeling useful enough in my current role? When would you step away from maybe the life you live today to pursue some of the things that may be important to you?
So let me just go back. So the parts of marketing is one of those jobs. I would compare it to operations. So I don't know how much snow you get in Kentucky, but like we would always say this in Boston, there's all the snow all the time. And so you go into work and you never say to the operations people who've probably spent all night or all morning clearing, oh, great job. Like I was able to walk right in. Like you're just like, oh, they left a little piece of snow right there. Like I almost slipped, and it's like everything else was flawless, but there was one piece of snow. That's what marketing's like. So no one ever says, you guys are doing a great job. It's like, hey, someone else just was in the press, or did you see someone's getting all this buzz, or this competitor, is eating our lunch. And, so it's one of those roles. And that comes with the territory. Like, I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, so it's not new, but, sometimes it's just like, oh, this is is not fun. And even though, as I said, I have those moments where I'm excited, I'm like, this worked out really well, we won together, we did a great job, there's still a lot of moments where it's just stressful and there's not a lot of appreciation. There's politics, which there are in many companies. Sometimes the things that I want to do, or the team wants to do, or even the company wants to do, for whatever reasons, the investors won't invest in that, or there's hurt. So it's not a completely, you never can do exactly what you want. So I mean, there are times when I've just been like, this isn't fun. This is soul sucking or soul, so I'm sure that there's moments where I'm like, I don't need to do this. Why am I doing this? And there's people who unfortunately aren't always nice. That happens too in a cutthroat, world where, I mean, I don't know if you know a lot about PE firms or if you've worked with them before. They would sell their grandmother for $1. So they're not the nicest people. They want numbers, they want metrics. And if you're not delivering, they don't care if you're sick. They don't care about any personal thing. So, that's part of it too. So I mean, there's definitely moments where it's just like, I don't know if this is worth it.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. Let me ask you this then. So when you do move beyond being CMO today from your high tech position, what do you think will give you purpose beyond that role?
I mean, I'm probably going to answer this. I'm going to say the same things again, like getting things done. So whether it's getting things done just around the house or things that I've always wanted to do or accomplish. And then, as I said, getting more involved in some of these philanthropic and charitable organizations. And, like here's an example. And I didn't do this, but so at the food pantry, there's a guy who had worked at Chick-fil-A and he's like, you guys are doing this all wrong. Like, it's so much more efficient if you deliver and we're all like, this guy knows his supply chain and he was a kid, but it was like, wow, he completely revolutionized that. So I can totally see doing something, I would hope, doing something like that, where people just haven't thought of it. And again, it was a great day when he did that. He was probably like 18 or 19, but so bringing efficiency or helping a company or a person do better, I think would get me excited. And again, I mentioned I have this one young woman that I've been working with on the Cape. She just started her own business, and she used to work for Apple. She worked in their, she was like on their Genius Bar, if you ever have Apple products. Yeah. And I don't know if you heard about this. There was a crazy person who drove into an Apple store in Hingham, Massachusetts, and killed somebody. Gosh. Yeah, it was horrible. He just drove into the front. Anyway, she was one of the people that was there. So Apple actually, I think, was very good to them, said you can all go on paid leave. You can see a therapist. You don't have to come back for a while, take this time. And anyway, she decided not to go back and wanted to start her own business. And her business is she drives up and down the Cape and does Mac support in your home, which is great because there's a lot of elderly people, and then there's a lot of people who are vacationing. And again, you may not know Cape Cod, but it's a tough place to get to. And if you've got a Mac issue, to get it fixed, the closest place is probably an hour and a half away. So her business has this great premise. And, she came up with that business. I didn't help her with that idea, but I've been helping her execute it. And I'm like so excited. We probably text every couple of days, but she's doing really well. And she has a special needs son. So one of the reasons why she wanted to start her own business was so she could spend more time with him and be more flexible. And that's actually worked out really well for her too. So I would love to do more of that, like helping people, have a better situation, right, for themselves, for their family. And again, I'm just excited for her that she's doing really well.
Yeah. This has been so much fun today. I feel like I've gotten so many good nuggets from you, and just hearing you talk and sharing your journey. What else should I have asked you today, though?
Well, so I'm curious. So are you like a retirement coach? Like if in another year or 2 years, I'm like, what should I do? Or because I have read books about like, and I know there's tests and quizzes you could take. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I think, what I've noticed about our industry is our industry, I think, focuses a lot on the numbers. So it's very quantitative focused. If you die with the most money, we come up with the best tax strategy, therefore you will be happy. And what I'm finding about high achievers is that's not always the case, right? Some transition to retirement and they have a really successful retirement, and some don't. And so when I think about you for a minute, right, and just hearing you talk today, one of the things you kept coming back to is I need to feel useful in the activities that I'm doing. And so it sounds like you may pivot from being CMO, which is a very high stress job. I work 60 hours a week, into now I'm volunteering, but I'm revolutionizing how these charities maybe operate today, and I'm bringing value to them in a way that no one else has. And so I think that's amazing. I mean, what a great skill set that you just want to be useful and give back, whether it's in a corporate setting or more of a volunteering setting, right? So that's one of the things that I heard. But I think there's a lot of things that we have to account for if we're going to have a successful retirement. The first question, I got this from Denise Logan. She's a keynote speaker, and she's fabulous. She's written a Wall Street Journal bestselling book. But one of the things that she always asks her clients, and she works with a lot of top execs, she works with business owners, but she asks them, what does work provide you outside of money and financial security? And she asks them to list out 15 things. Now,
15. Wow.
Yeah, 15. Now, you gave a very vulnerable answer right away. I would say most people, they have to write like the 10th, 11th, 13th thing before they would say, I want to feel useful.
Huh. I'm just curious, what are you hearing from most other people?
Yeah, so I think it starts out surface level. It provides me a place to go, right? So think during COVID, you were going into an office, you're commuting, it's a place to go. I did, my spouse and I, we were around each other 24/7. So, it was a place to go and to have a break, right? So that could be one thing. Community. A lot of people don't realize this, but they get their greatest sense of community from their work. And what I heard you say is, hey, over the last, 30 plus years, I have this fantastic network. But what I think a lot of people are finding, especially high achievers, is when they retire, that network kind of dies with it. And so I think a lot of people are scared, right? They maybe even to lose that network or not be relevant maybe to this network. And so so that's something that we're seeing. But I would say just it's a little bit more superficial at first when you ask people, hey, what does work provide you outside of money and financial security? And I think as people have an opportunity to really kind of write things down. If you ever heard, I've always heard you ask people, what does this provide you? And give me three things, because the first two oftentimes are top of mind. The third, you really have to do some soul searching. So in this exercise, when you ask for 15 things, right, you're doing a lot of soul searching to come up with 15 things. When I said 15, you were like, what? 15, right? But work provides, I mean, oftentimes I think for folks who really transition effectively into retirement, it's not an issue if work provides you certain things, but it's an issue not knowing what it provides you. So if you have a conversation today with yourself about, hey, this is what I get from work, then when you retire, or let's say in 2 to 3 years, if what you think happens actually happens, then we have a plan of, okay, where am I going to get all of these other things in retirement? And it may not be from one thing, right? There may not be one thing that you can do in retirement that's going to fill the need of what work provides you today, right? Like if you went out and played pickleball, that might provide you community, but that might not provide you mental stimulation. You might not feel useful unless you scored like the game-winning point, I guess, right?
Right.
So I think, in terms of what I do, I work in wealth management, but I would say one of the reasons I'm so fascinated in having these conversations, especially with high achievers like yourself, is I think good wealth management, what it boils down to is aligning your capital, that's your time, energy, and resources, with what's important to you. And so I think so often when people come in and I sit down with them, right, doesn't matter what they've done up until that point. Oftentimes they haven't clearly defined what the picture on the front of the box looks like. Let's say it's a puzzle we're talking about. They don't know what the picture on the front of the box looks like you would know if you bought a puzzle. And they don't even know if they have the right pieces, right? And so sometimes it's putting the puzzle together, but clearly defining what's on the front of the box. So
Mm-hmm.
I think as an industry, we focus a lot on the numbers, but I think what we neglect is more of the qualitative side of things of helping align what's important, uh, your wealth management, what's important to you with your money, if you will. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in terms of you're retiring. I think asking there's 7 questions that I sit down with folks and ask them, but the one that Denise Logan really starts out with, I think, is such a good starting point for every other question that we would ask from there. So I've been asking some of them to you as we've been going through this, like where are you going to find community, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you plan on aging well? And I think aging well isn't just health and fitness. I think it's that mental stimulation. The people
Mm-hmm.
that I find that are the youngest in their older age are folks who are staying mentally engaged in some way. And I think it sounds like you're a lifelong learner, right? You mentioned AI, you mentioned all these things that you just love learning. I think you're going to age really well because I think you'll always stay mentally engaged. I have a humorous story for you. I talked
Sure.
to a 78-year-old recently. He sold a business. And I said, you seem younger to me than some of the other 78-year-olds I've talked to. I said, why do you think you've aged so well? And he said, Nick, I have a ranch in Texas, and I go out to the ranch, and he said there's a cafe out there near my ranch, and so went out to the cafe, and on the front porch there's all these old people playing dominoes, and so he said, so here's a 78-year-old calling them old people, right?
Right.
And he
Right.
said, I got a picture with all the old people, right, who are playing dominoes, and as I looked at the picture, I was the oldest person in the picture. But and I said, well, why do you call them old people? And he said, well, they all retired at 60 and they don't do anything. So, so funny going back to your original question is, Nick, I was going to ask you, what is retirement? Yeah, I'm kind of wondering the same thing for high achievers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because retirement, I think, as it was coined back in 1959, that it's this endless vacation, right? Where you're going to travel, you're going to play golf 5 days a week. Your day looks however you want it. And I think what we're finding is no, people actually really like the mental stimulation in their work. I think people are finding they like having a routine and some consistency. And even the best vacation, I don't know if you've ever been on vacation for like a month at a time, but even the best vacation at times can get old, right? Or if you have filet
Mm-hmm.
mignon every night, right? Even
Right.
filet
Right.
mignon can get old. So a
Sure.
30-year vacation, I think, for a lot of high achievers that I talk to, it's not super satiating, if you will.
Okay. Well, one thing, I don't know that you didn't ask me, I didn't say this, but I think, and this is sort of like a variation of what I said before. I want to be useful, but I also want to be appreciated. So that's a piece of it too. And that's one thing that I just learned. Even people who make, some of the, and again, I work with a lot of high performing salespeople who make tons of money. And at the end of the day, the money is important to them. That's why they're in sales. But the appreciation seems to be huge. They want to be recognized. That almost getting the little plaque or the award was almost as important as the money. And it was just interesting to see that. And I'm the same way, but it's just something that I realized I need to be better about making people feel appreciated, or if they did a good job, telling them, like not just assuming, oh, they know that they did a good thing, like telling them again and again, that was really special, or you really killed it, on that last program. So, but that's important too. So are there still ways to feel appreciated once you're outside of that sort of an environment, sure, with friends, but how do you get that recognition and appreciation? So that's, I think, another piece that I want to make sure that that's a part of my retirement, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. I had a client who retired in 2017 and she won like volunteer of the year. And so imagine this, like, big presentation and really honoring her. And so I could see something like that if it's not in a corporate setting. You've revolutionized now some charity that is making such a great impact, but wouldn't have been able to make the impact they're making if not for your efforts. And so I could see how, you're both useful in that situation, but you're also being recognized and appreciated for your hard work. But yeah, I think that's it's a super vulnerable conversation that I think we have to have with ourselves, right? As we're entering into retirement is, hey, what do I get from work today? I think there's a lot of shaming in because you're 60, 65, you should retire. I don't agree with that. I don't think everyone is meant to retire. But I think we do need to be aware of what do we get from work outside of money and financial security. I think when we can answer that question, then I think we're going to have a much smoother retirement, and likely we can figure out, okay, what are all the areas that I need to address as I'm making this transition. So yeah, I think it'll be fun. I would love to check back in 5 years from now and see what Christine is doing, because I do not think that you're the type of person, in my opinion, that's ever going to like really retire. I think you'll always be, engaged in some way for 10, 15 hours, but I think you may not be getting paid for it. You may be volunteering your time and really volunteering at a high level, because you just have too much talent to not do that. And if you didn't want to, no big deal. But it's one of those things. I think you have such a gift and such talent that you likely will, and you enjoy it. That's the biggest thing, is you enjoy it.
Well, thank you for those kind words.
Yeah, well, this has been a super fun conversation. I really appreciate you just being vulnerable. I appreciate you sharing just a little bit about your journey and where you're at today, and where you see the next few years going. And yeah, I'm excited to Google you for like 5 years from now and see what you've accomplished.
Sounds like a plan.
Well, thanks, Christine. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.